Occupation, commercial fisherman. Distinguishing marks or features, rugged, resourceful, proud, ornery some of the time, independent all of the time. American fishing's small businessman, the independent operator who stays close to shore and seldom fishes deeper than 5 fathoms for his catch. He's the industry's deep sea counterpart, the man who fishes for a living on a small scale. His equipment, a boat, an outboard motor, and some fishing gear. Yet every year, all over the country, thousands of these small boat fishermen bring in millions of pounds of fish. In the singular, he may not be too important. In the plural, he and his kind are spread from Maine to Alaska, from the Great Lakes to the Louisiana bayous, in creeks, rivers, lakes, bays, and inshore coastal waters. And his job, which is one of the oldest in the world, forms an important part of America's national economy. Hank Delafield fishes for lobster off Rockland, Maine. He sets his course from number 6 marker buoy and travels east for 5 minutes, locating his pots by dead reckoning. Lobstermen have a strong sense of property rights, so to avoid trespassing, each man's buoys bear his own distinctive colors. Lobsters aren't the world's most sociable creatures. Hank has to put pegs between their claws to keep them from killing each other. Before he pegs them, Hank also has to watch for shorts. Because of conservation laws, undersize and egg-bearing lobsters have to be thrown back. But it's easy to screen the candidates, especially when your eyesight is improved by a state fine. The lobster pot is a fairly simple device. The inside is baited. An empty bottle or cork float is tied to the buoy line about 1 fathom from the pot to hold the line off the bottom and keep it from fouling. When the lobster locates the bait, he usually climbs through the funnel net to investigate. Once inside, he's only hours away from a gourmet's dinner plate. Hank fishes about 100 pots a day. A good catch runs from 50 to 100 lobsters. And when you consider they average better than a pound each, it adds up to a pretty fair day's wage. It's not a bad life, if you can survive the hurricanes and live off your capital when prices are down. America's commercial fishing isn't confined to salt water. 1,000 miles inland, the fresh waters of the Mississippi and the Great Lakes yield another source of wealth, the catfish. And near Bayport, Michigan, in Lake Huron's Saginaw Bay, the Kulikowski brothers are going out after them. Catfish are usually caught with a trot line, which is nothing more than a long line of fish hooks. The gear is secured with keg floats on each end and anchors on the bottom. Hanging from the trot line at regular intervals are ganging lines. Hanging from the ganging lines are baited hooks. The rest is up to the catfish. The next day is the payoff. The catfish is very popular in the Midwest. The Mississippi cat may weigh as much as 70 pounds. It also has some pretty spectacular cousins, the huge European variety that weighs in at 400 pounds, and the electric catfish of the Nile River, which shocks its enemies. But there's still another reason for the catfish's popularity. In the Great Lakes and Mississippi River areas, from Fort Wilkins, Michigan to Fort Phillip, Louisiana, this bewhiskered fish has been many a politician's strongest ally. For local office seekers have found that a political rally and a good fish fry go hand in hand. East by southeast and back in salt water, about 150 miles south of Cape Cod, near Stonington, Connecticut, Jim Gardner is dredging for bay scallops. Aside from being one of the most valuable shellfish in America, the scallop is also a very eccentric individual. It propels itself through the water jet fashion by opening and closing its shell. This ludicrous and unseaworthy maneuver fortunately has one advantage. It develops a muscle, the only part of the scallop we eat. Jim likes them raw. Most people prefer them fried or broiled. Like all other states, Connecticut has its conservation laws. So boating is more than just a hobby with Inspector Adams. Still, the relationship is friendly. Besides, who wants to get chased when you're dragging a dredge? The handling of nets is a familiar sight in fishing areas all over the world. In fact, the fishing net is older than the Old Testament. Every spring, within the shadows of New York skyscrapers, the Hudson River becomes alive with spawning shad. No one knows exactly where they go during the rest of the year, but somehow they find their way back with amazing accuracy. Marine biologists say the shad like the Hudson's salt content. Many of these profitable fish are caught with a stake gill net, like Angelo Brocato and his men are using. It's called a gill net because when the fish try to swim through it on their way upriver, their gills become tangled in the mesh. It's hard, lonely, back-breaking work, raking clams in New Jersey's Barnegat Bay. But Harry Benson has a family to feed. So he works until sunset, even though with no moon, it'll be hard to navigate tonight, and home and dinner are at least 2 hours away. The Chesapeake Bay area, America's oyster barrel. Here in the tidewater section of Maryland and Virginia, you'll see them fishing in fleets, for these grounds yield almost half the oysters caught in the United States. It's nice country down here, just north of Cape Hatteras, the marine world's Mason and Dixon line. And you're not far from historic Yorktown, where a lord by the name of Cornwallis signed a piece of paper ending a 4-year war. A war fought, among other things, over right to commercial fishing grounds. Men like Sam Frisbee tong for oysters up and down the Atlantic and Gulf coasts and as far as the Pacific Northwest. Sam tongs for seed oysters. Seed oysters are sold to a buy boat, and the buy boat owner sells them to a cultivator for planting new oyster beds. It's really farming underwater. You know, if you told any of these men not to eat an oyster in a month without an R in it, you'd get a laugh. Today, with modern processing, oysters are on the menu throughout the entire year. The Chesapeake Bay region is not only America's oyster barrel, it provides a large share of the crabs caught in all the coastal waters of the United States. Frank Jackson's trot line is much the same as John Kulikowski's in Lake Huron, except instead of baited hooks, Frank ties chunks of salted eel directly to the line. If the crabs are hungry enough, or mean enough, they get a one-way ride to the surface, where Frank catches them with a dip net. Frank will shuttle back and forth along the trot line most of the day, dipping crabs as he goes. Further south along the continental shelf, where the water turns clear and blue and the shoreline tumbles into Florida sand dunes, Joe Sykes and his son are out looking for mullet. In a way, you need two kinds of fishing gear to catch mullet: a gill net and silence. There they are, mullet, one of the most important food fish in the South. as a military maneuver, this operation deserves a salute from a 5-star general. After you locate your school of fish, the basic strategy is to drop a gill net around them in a large circle. You have to be very quiet. If the mullet gets frightened or suspicious, they'll escape before you can close your net. The circle is completed. Now you make as much noise as possible to drive them into your gill net. And that's how you catch mullet. You know, the Florida mullet fisherman is an extraordinary fellow. He often catches only enough fish to pay the bills, then knocks off and goes fishing with a pole and line just for the fun of it. The fisherman has good reason to be thankful. Westward, along the coasts of Mississippi and Louisiana, and up into the bayous, you'll find families like the Blanchards, asking for divine protection. Today is a special occasion. The shrimp fishing was good last year, so they're starting this season with a brand new motor. When the Blanchards reach their fishing grounds, Lou sometimes uses a cast net to locate the shrimp. This old family skill isn't absolutely necessary, but Lou gets a kick out of throwing it. There are shrimp down there, all right. Lots of them. Small, tender ones. They start to drag, using a small otter trawl. A bottle is used as a marker board. As the boat moves along, the mouth of the trawl is held open by 2 planks, called otter boards. Cork floats raised at the head rope, Lead weights sink the foot rope, helping to keep the mouth open and the gear on the bottom. Not a bad catch for a first drag. The place, Alaska. The time, salmon season. Eleanor Morgan and her husband Steve work for a local cannery which owns their boat and motor. The Morgans are part of a large fleet selling all of its catch to the cannery by agreement. When the salmon are running up here, everybody goes fishing. When Secretary of State Seward bought Alaska from Russia for 2 cents an acre, a lot of people thought he paid too much. Of course, in those days, about all Alaska did was supply San Francisco with ice and Catherine the Great with furs. Maybe that's why they called it Seward's Icebox and Seward's Folly. But the Secretary knew a bargain when he saw one. The territory proved to be a lucrative investment, chiefly because of its largest and most valuable resource, salmon. In fact, salmon was the main reason for Alaska's phenomenal growth over the past half-century. Sometimes the only difference between an amateur and a professional might be the number of lines he has in the water. The legal limit is 4. To conserve salmon, the Fish and Wildlife Service also limits the season. Because time means money, fishermen usually keep an extra motor and other gear on hand just in case. Many of them use outboards. If an outboard gets grounded by the strong Alaskan tides, it won't harm the propeller because of the tilt-up action of the motor. Morgans have a strike. Now the fun begins. Can you imagine? People spend money to go salmon fishing in Alaska, and these two get paid for it. When the salmon aren't running, Eleanor is a full-time housewife, and Steve goes after clams and crabs. Commercial fishing played an important part in the development of the United States. In fact, the fishing grounds of New England gave birth to some of the first American colonies. But even more important, this hardy, vital industry helped shape the character of our people. Today, every day of the year, Alarm clocks ring from Maine to Alaska, and men like Hank Delafield get up and go fishing in creeks, rivers, lakes, bays, and inshore coastal waters, contributing much to America's economy and keeping alive a tradition of rugged independence.